Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. The Senate impeachment trial of Donald Trump set to start next week, and today each side spelled out their cases. In a few minutes, we're going to be speaking with the former Watergate prosecutor about that, and later in the show, we're going to discuss COVID, including issues with vaccine distribution, concerns about nursing homes, and of course that new variant. Plus, the latest controversy involving Marjorie Taylor Greene. She, the lunatic QAnon supporter, now a Georgia congresswoman who was somehow given a plum committee assignment by the brain trust of the GOP. But let's begin tonight with impeachment, as we're getting a better idea about the Democrats' case against Donald Trump as laid out by those House impeachment managers. Now, I'm going to run through portions of the case that they've just filed. It says that Trump, quote, singularly was responsible for the January 6th riot, and he used the powers of his office to advance his own personal interests at the expense of the nation. The filing also says, quote, if provoking an insurrections riot against a joint session of Congress after losing an election is not an impeachable offense, it is hard to imagine what would be. It goes on to say that after losing the election, Trump, quote, summoned a mob to Washington, exhorted them into a frenzy, and aimed them like a cannon down Pennsylvania Avenue. Now they're talking about stuff like this. Donald Trump at the rally right before the riot began.
We're going to the Capitol, and after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Now, Donald Trump's legal team, the latest version of it at least, filed its defense brief today. And again, I'm going to run through some of that before we get to our guest. They are hiding behind the First Amendment, saying what Trump did was just basically exercising his right to express his opinions, including that the election was suspect. That's dangerous ground. It seems like Democrats were anticipating the president would still go with that fakakta idea of a stolen election, so their filing also addresses the issue of free speech and election legitimacy. And again, I quote, the First Amendment was never intended to allow a president to revoke lawless action if he loses at the polls. Trump's defense also talks about due process. They plan to argue that Trump was denied due process because things are moving too fast here, so he can't adequately defend himself, and also that the impeachment article was improperly drafted. And a central part of Trump's defense says it is unconstitutional to try an ex-president because, quote, the Senate lacks jurisdiction to remove a man from office who does not hold office. The Democrats, though, are saying it is entirely constitutional, and they're quoting from the actual document. Their filing says, a president must answer comprehensively for his conduct in office from his first day in office through his last. It goes on, because Trump was president at the time of the impeachment in the House, the Senate has no choice but to act. And they cite the Constitution itself, quoting, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. And the Democrats point out the key word is all. It doesn't say the Senate has power to try impeachments against only sitting presidents. And of course, there is even precedent. I want to bring in our guest now, Watergate prosecutor Nick Akerman. Nick was also an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. Nick, you know, when people say, well, we know who the jury is, it's the 100 senators, but when the House managers lay out their case, is that their primary audience, or is it the American public? And depending on the answer, does it change how you put your case on?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, first of all, it's the American public. I mean, it's a trial, but this is not like a regular trial that you have in court. It's not like you have preemptory challenges to get rid of some of the jurors. The jurors are already in place, and those jurors answer to the electorate. And you've got a number of these Republican senators who are up for re-election the next 2 years. And so they're going to be really paying close attention to the reaction of the electorate. So what you need to do is have a very strong, compelling, and succinct case brought before the American public where people are glued to their television sets and pay close attention to what the evidence is. The idea is to appeal indirectly to those senators through the public. And
originally, Nick, when the obviously had the vote in the House, and we knew there was going to be a trial. The thought was, well, we'll have a really expedited one, and we'll focus on just the events of January 6th, what was said at the stage and then the aftermath. But now it seems pretty clear that there's going to be a tick-tock, that even before the election, President Trump made clear that if he didn't get the result he wanted, it was an illegitimate election, that it was stolen, and then the constant stoking of that fire until it turned into, what we saw happened in that forest fire of January 6th. They're going to try to say there's a cause and an effect, and they're going to connect the dots, and they're attempting to do it, as I understand it, as an appeal to the passions of the American public in really visceral ways they can get their arms around.
That's right. This has got to be it's a very simple trial. It's all about lying. It's the big lie that Donald Trump won the election when he didn't, a lie that he set up before the election even took place by having the legislatures in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin make it impossible to count the absentee ballots until after the same day ballots were counted, so that he could claim later on that the whole thing was a fraud. To me, the star witness in this entire case has to be Donald J. Trump. He's the person that they should be calling to the witness stand after they set the stage with what happened at the Capitol.
Well, let's pick up from there, Nick. You've got a piece that's going to be coming out, an editorial in the Daily News, specifically where you say that Donald Trump ought to be on the witness stand and explain basically what was in his head from the election till that fateful day on January 6th. Compelling viewing. But the witnesses, I think, could tell a story that for anyone out there who said, oh, I know it all. No, you don't. Let's hear from the rioters as to why they showed up and why they stormed the Capitol that day. Did they think they were getting direct orders from their president? Let's hear from the Capitol Police with their body cams about how they were in the fight of their lives and how they didn't know, and in some cases didn't, that they'd survived that day. I'd love to see the video that we haven't seen yet, that apparently is the most compelling, horrific video that has been used in these prosecutions, or in our investigations, I should say, into the rioters. There was the security cameras from inside the Capitol. There is so much that I think the public believes they've seen that haven't, or the voices they haven't heard from, that would really make for a compelling argument for impeachment.
Well, I think what I would do is I would start right out with the videos that occurred, that the action that took place inside the Capitol. I mean, the American public saw what was going on outside, and you saw the people out there and screaming and yelling and jumping around. But what you didn't see what was going on inside. And there are lots of videos, like you said, that show that. It shows a coordinated effort on the part of a lot of people. It shows people talking about going after Vice President Pence and lynching him, going after and killing Nancy Pelosi. I think what you need to start this trial, and the way I would do it, would be to start with those videos. I'd have an expert FBI agent or a former FBI agent up on the witness stand who can point out to the jurors and to the American public what's going on, make some sense out of the sign language, the signals that are being given, the coordination that occurred throughout that attack, and to really give it the context. And I mean, once you set that stage, then I would start calling the other witnesses. It would be Donald Trump. I would put him on the stand. I would put on Capitol police officers who could testify directly to how horrible the whole situation was and what they endured during that time. I would bring on statements that were made by the actual people who were there, the rioters. I mean, their big defense in this entire matter has been that they were acting at the direction of Donald Trump. Well, let's get some of those statements and read them into the record. Let's put those in, because almost every person to a T who has been indicted on this says they're using the old "I was following orders" defense. I was doing it because my president told me to do it. So put that into the record. Put into the record the harm that was caused, the people that were killed. I would turn this into a pretty simple but very compelling, very succinct trial that shows what this lie did, and that the perpetrator of that lie was Donald Trump, and show exactly what the consequences of it were, not only for the people that were in the Capitol at the time, but for our democratic process.
In terms of the defense, we already know the shakeup in staff, reportedly, not just over the fees attached, but also the president wanted to argue that the election was stolen, and the original counsel said, we're not going down that road here. It's not good for you. It's not good for me if I want to keep my legal license. The principal arguments we think they're going to make is that this is unconstitutional and that all he was doing was exercising his free speech. He wasn't screaming fire in a crowded theater. Do you believe they're going to actually try to relitigate the election and say it was stolen? And if they do, how dangerous would that be?
Well, first of all, any decent lawyer can't make the argument that the election was stolen. I mean, under the rule of ethics, lawyers are not supposed to lie. They can't lie, or you can be disbarred. The idea that Trump was exercising his free speech by telling people to go up to the Capitol and show them how tough you can be, and having his own lawyer talk about, getting involved in trial by combat. I mean, what do they think they're doing? I mean, there really is no defense here other than to try and create a smoke screen by talking about constitutional issues or about some other factor that nobody's going to pay attention to if you get into evidence that is compelling and tells the story of what happened. That's why I think it's absolutely critical that they put Donald Trump on the stand, just to show what a small, petty, and mean individual he is. Because now that he's no longer the president, sitting on a witness stand, being cross-examined and ripped to shreds, is going to convince these senators that it's time to convict.
As much as Trump likes the camera, I don't think he's going to like this one. They can't compel him to testify, can they?
That's right. Well, first of all, the ratings will be great, so he's going to like the ratings. But they can compel him to show up. He does not have a Fifth Amendment right to refuse to respond in a civil proceeding. He can certainly, as to specific questions, assert his Fifth Amendment privilege, but as a general matter, he has to show up and he has to be there. And if he's going to take the Fifth Amendment, he's going to look like he's hiding something. I mean, why? And certainly in a civil case, you can use that as an adverse inference against a person if they take the Fifth Amendment. So it would just be another reason to convict, and it would be another piece of evidence that would show the American public what this man is all about.
And I hope people are listening, because I know the inclination especially for these electeds, is to pontificate up there. Show the video. Let the people tell the stories that were there in the room. You don't need to dress it up or adorn it in any way. The facts speak for themselves, but like you said, it's compelling, and it ought to be that way in the presentation of the case. Nick, I always appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.